Hello and welcome to the Richmond Rent Program Community Workshop titled How to Ensure Your Rental Property is in Compliance with the Richmond Rent Ordinance. My name is Monica Bejarano and I am the Senior Management Analyst of the Richmond Rent Program, and I will be conducting today's workshop. Please note that this workshop is considered a micro workshop, so hopefully that will this presentation will assist you all to understand all the different components and requirements to be a landlord in the city of Richmond. And I will also show you our website, so hopefully you can find some of these materials that are in this presentation. Okay, so we will start now. So on this slide is an overview of topics that will be discussed. We have the introduction of the Richmond Rent Ordinance and Rent Program, which properties are subject to the Richmond Rent Ordinance, what is rent control and just cause for eviction protections, enrollment and registration, residential rental housing fee, and a review of City of Richmond current fiscal year 2023 to 2024 fees and how they're applicable to rental properties. And lastly, a compliance checklist that will hopefully bring everything together. And feel free to use this checklist as it may be a lot of information. So I do recommend that you use it. So on to the first topic. So first I want to start with what is the RENT program's mission? The RENT program was established in January of 2017 following the approval of the Richmond Fair Rent Just Cause for Eviction and Homeowner Protection Ordinance. I will refer to our ordinance as the Richmond Rent Ordinance. And this was passed by a majority of Richmond voters in November of 2016. And our mission of the RENT program is to promote neighborhood and community stability, healthy housing, and affordability for Richmond tenants through regulating of those landlord-tenant matters that reasonably relate to rents and evictions while maintaining a landlord's right to a fair return. So what do we do here at the Richmond Rent program? So on this slide, we have a variety of services that we do provide to the community. After the adoption of the rent ordinance, it then led to the creation of a new rent program in 2017. And services that we provide include comprehensive counseling on the rent ordinance, relocation ordinance, and applicable state law. We provide referrals to community legal service providers, such as the Eviction Defense Center. That is one of the contracts that we currently have. Targeted outreach to tenants and landlords involved in the termination of a tenancy for a just cause to evict. Administration of the rent adjustment petition process. I can go into this a little further to explain that the rent adjustment petition process is specifically for properties subject to our rent control provisions. We host monthly community education workshops, such as this one, and we facilitate monthly meetings of the Richmond Rent Board and billing and collection of the rental housing fee, which I will also expand on later. So now we will move into the properties that are subject to the Richmond Rent Ordinance. So first I will go from left to right, first covering fully covered rental units. This means that properties that are subject to both rent control and just cause for eviction protections. And these are typically multi-unit properties built on or before February 1st of 1995. In the center, we have partially covered rental properties, which are only subject to our just cause for eviction protection provisions. So these are properties not under rent control, however, still partially covered because they're subject to our just cause for eviction provisions of the rent ordinance. And these are typically properties that are either subsidized units, including Section 8 tenancies, properties with one dwelling unit on one parcel. Condominiums are another example of properties that are partially covered. And lastly, new construction, those that are constructed after February 1st of 1995. There's a note there that states that new construction is under the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, which requires units be permitted with a certificate of occupancy, meaning that if it is a single family home or properties with one dwelling unit on one parcel, may not be subject to rent control. And the third, there are properties or rentals that are fully exempt, meaning that they're not subject to rent control or to just cause for eviction protections, and therefore do not need to follow the compliance requirements under our enrollment and tenancy registrations, which again, I will explain later. And these types of properties are those that where the landlord and tenant share kitchen and or bathroom. Single family homes where there's a permitted additional dwelling unit, for short, it's an ADU when it was added to the property, and the main house is owner occupied. We do have a chart of what that looks like later in the presentation. And lastly, we have retirement homes. So on this slide, I want to bring to your attention the two main components of the Richmond Rent Ordinance. So we have rent control and just cause for eviction protections. As I mentioned earlier, those that are fully covered are both subject to rent control and just cause for eviction protections. Properties that are only partially covered are only subject to our just cause for eviction protections. So just an overview, rent control, these are rents that are regulated, where the maximum allowable rent, for short as the MAR, is calculated by taking the base rent and the annual general adjustment, which is the cost of living increase, and any allowable individual rent adjustment that is ordered by a hearing examiner. The individual rent adjustment is actually referring to the petition process. So I will first start with the definition of what the annual general adjustment means. This is under the 60% of the consumer price index in the Bay Area, or 3%, whichever is less. Please note that this is due to the passage of Measure P during the 2022 general election. The annual general adjustment is no longer calculated at 100% of the consumer price index, but rather 60% of the CPI or 3%, whichever is lower. So essentially, when we do make these announcements of these rent increases or the annual general adjustment, it's likely that it will be no more than 3%. For each year. It does require under the ordinance that the rent program announce what the annual general adjustment be for rent controlled properties by June 30th of each year, so that landlords may apply this rent increase on or after September 1st of each year. Moving to the right, what is the petition process or the rent adjustment petition process? It's a mechanism to increase or decrease the maximum allowable rent, or the MAR, based on the reasons permitted by the rent ordinance. So for example, a tenant may file a petition to have their rent decreased if the unit is deteriorated, there's inadequate repairs, or there's habitability issues on the property. A landlord may also file a petition if they made capital improvements or believe that they're not receiving a fair return on their investment. This is referred to as the MNOI, the Maintenance of Net Operating Income petition. Or another example, you can, if you're a landlord, you may also file this petition to increase above the maximum allowable rent. If there's an increase or allowed occupants in that unit. So for example, if you have two people on a lease and you agree to having a third occupant, so maybe a friend that wants to move in with a couple, and you're fine with that, but of course you may want to consider increasing your rent just a little more for that additional occupant, so you would need to go through the petition process to do that, and then a rent adjustment would then be ordered by our hearing examiner. And I also mentioned previously, by establishing of what the MAR is by taking the base rent plus the annual general adjustment. So the base rent is the rent in effect as of July 21st of 2015, or the first rent charged for tenants that moved in after that date. So there may be tenancies that have been there for more than 10 or 20 years, we would still need to establish that base rent of what it was as of July 21st of 2015 as of that date. But if you have a newer tenancy, say that you had a tenant move in after 2016, 17, 18, 19, those whatever date that they moved in or occupied that unit or first paid rent, that would be their base rent. Again, the base rent is applicable only to properties under rent control. Moving to the right side of the screen, we have an overview of what the just cause for eviction protections means. This means that a landlord needs to have one of the 8 just causes in order to terminate a tenancy. Those include failure to pay rent, breach of lease, nuisance, failure to give access, temporarily vacate in order to undertake substantial repairs, owner move-in or owner relative move-in, withdrawal from the rental market, also known as the Ellis Act, and temporary tenancy. So this is the chart that I was referring to previously when I was discussing the accessory dwelling units or ADUs. We have a visual of how the ordinance describes how certain properties, if there is an ADU and a single family home in the front, and whether the permit status, how can it affect the how that property is subject to our ordinance. So for example, on the first line, we have that the main house is occupied by the owner, but the ADU, which is the back unit, is permitted and occupied by a tenant. This then means the ADU is exempt from rent control and just cause for eviction protections. However, if the main house is the owner's primary residence and the second unit is not permitted, then this would then subject the second unit under rent control and just cause for eviction protections. Now, how does one go about ensuring that their ADU is permitted, or if the current status of it is not permitted? This is where you would need to get in contact with the planning division, and we have their contact information here on this slide. Their phone number is 510-620-6706. For more information or guidance of how to understand this chart, or if you have additional questions, you can always contact our office, which the number is here listed on the screen as well. So now moving into what are the requirements to ensure that you are in compliance with the rent ordinance. This requires that every landlord in the city of Richmond enroll and register their property. So first, the City of Richmond Rent Program enrollment form. This form can be completed online, or you can print it out and fill it out. But a property enrollment form must be completed for each parcel with at least one rental unit. There's an example on this screen showing what the enrollment form looks like. But very quickly, I would like to refer to the enrollment form itself. So let me go ahead and stop sharing so we can show you. All right, so let's minimize that. So this is our enrollment and registration webpage. On this webpage, we have a general description and information about what that means, and referring to our ordinance in Chapter 4 regulations, which then further explains registration and fees. If you scroll down to halfway through the page, we have two tables, one separated by the property enrollment form, also the tenancy registration form, and amended property enrollment form. For the property enrollment form, which is shown here, you can see that it's first starting with the property ownership status. So we would require for the rental property street address with the city, state, and zip code and parcel number. If you don't know the parcel number, that's fine. We have our program staff that can fill that in for you or let you know what the APN, that's the short for the parcel number, what that is. And if you're a new property owner, we would require your contact information as well. The next section, which is section A, is owner one information. If there's more than one owner, you definitely want to make sure you fill out this right side where it says ownership percentage. That is very important in order for staff to understand who the owner is, especially if you're inquiring about personal information about the property or wanting to know how much you may owe for the rental housing fee or necessarily any business that is concerning that property. So if the other owner is not listed on this form or not considered or is not listed as an authorized agent or property manager, staff may not disclose certain information to that person. So again, I just want to reiterate that it's very important to fill out this section here, which is section A of who holds the title. And section B, again, the authorized agent or property manager. If you work with a property management business, then you want to make sure you list their company name, the agent that you are working with, as well as their mailing address, phone number, and email. We do require for the owner's signature here at the bottom. This is to authorize that individual to conduct business or to potentially receive any notices or letters from the rent program regarding this property. So moving on to the second page, we have rent program mail. Again, this section, I would say it's small, but very important. This allows staff to understand who to send any notifications and statements to, whether it be owner 1, owner 2, or the authorized agent or property manager. If you do not check this box, staff will need you to make this correction. We would not be able to process this. So it's very important that you do list where you would like your notifications and statements sent to. You may only check one. Again, that's very important to note. We have had situations where they said the owner and the authorized agent would like to receive all statements and notifications. However, our system does not allow that, so we would just need the one person who would be mainly conducting business for this property. In the next section, which is section D, we have a total number of dwelling units. If you own a duplex, you will want to indicate 2. If in that duplex, we understand if it was constructed before or after, you would need to know when that building or property was constructed. In this example, we will say that it was built before February 1st of 1995. And here you will want to indicate what the unit address is. In our example, we have 1234 Main Street. Our status code, CR, which all status codes are listed here at the bottom. Let's say, for example, that we have 1234 Main Street. Unit A, currently rented as of 01/01/2018. But I'm the owner of the property and I actually occupy the second unit. So I will then list 123 Main Street, Unit B, but I live in that unit. It's not currently rented. So then I would refer to the unit status codes here where I can see owner occupied. So this is the code for that status. So I would then enter own OCCPD. And then I would indicate when did you move into that unit. That was also on 01/2018. Okay. Finally, and the probably easiest part is declaration and signature. So we would require a signature and print of who completed this form, whether it be an owner on title or property manager authorized agent, and they may include their information here at the bottom. Once you complete this enrollment form, you may return to the Richmond Rent Program by either mail, email, or by delivering in person. Okay, and so if you own a multi-unit property, let's say more than 50 units, we do include more sections here so you can fill out that information with those status codes as well. Going back to the the enrollment and registration webpage, you can see on this side is the tenancy registration form. On the tenancy registration form, you can see at the very top that this is to be completed by those only under rent control. Landlords must file this form for each existing tenancy and resubmit it for new tenancies or complete turnover of original occupants. If the property is under a governmentally subsidized single-family home, condominium, new construction tenancies, then you would not need to complete this tenancy registration form. Likely that if the property is subject to rent control, this tenancy registration form is required. Moving down this form, the first section A, you enter the basic rental unit information, the address, unit number if applicable, and the number of bedrooms. The next section, you would then list each tenant's name, first and last. Section C, you would indicate the beginning date of this tenancy. So we'll just use the last example that we had, which is in 2018. And there are, let's say, 3 tenants. Is this tenant on a month-to-month agreement or a fixed term lease? We'll say a fixed term lease. Now with what is it? It was a discount provided with the first 12 months of a month-to-month agreement or within the first term of the fixed term lease. I would then indicate yes or no. In this example, we'll say no. The base rent, again, the base rent is very important to know when you have a property that is under rent control. So for the base rent, I will indicate they moved in on January 1st of 2018. At the time of January 1st of 2018, the tenant was paying $1,200. Now, are there any additional fees or surcharges that I am charging that tenant? I'm not sure what the calculation here is doing. Apologies. Okay. And then now any additional fees or surcharges, again, this could include any gas, electricity, garbage. We could say it's an additional $50. So that would mean the tenant's base rent is $1,250. So on record, I have that the base rent for this tenant is $1,250. Security deposit information, again, you can say that you're charging $1,000. You would fill that in. You would then include what the check the box next to the housing services paid by the landlord or included in the rent. If it's water, garbage, parking, laundry, gas, electricity, make sure you check all the boxes that apply. End of the date of tenancy prior. So if the tenant had moved in a year before or months before, you will want to indicate that information here. In the example, we have January 1st of 2018. We will say that the last tenant moved out on December 1st of 2017. The reason that the prior tenants moved out, they moved out voluntarily. They just found another place to live. And like I said before, this form is very easy to complete. The last step is the declaration and signature. Is it, again, the owner on title, property manager that is filling out this form? Sign, print, phone number, email, and the date that you are submitting this form. Oh, apologies. Okay, so back to the presentation. So move forward to the enrollment and registration webpage. So after you complete either the enrollment and registration form, if necessary, so all landlords are to complete the enrollment form. Only landlords that have rent-controlled properties have to fill out the tenancy registration form. Methods that you're able to submit or file this form to the rent program, again, is by mail, in person, or email. All of our information is on this slide here. You can see by mail, our office is located at 440 Civic Center Plaza, Suite 200 in Richmond, California. If you are mailing it, make sure to add the attention to billing and registration unit. This is our staff who processes and files these forms. In person, same deal, 440 Civic Center Plaza, Richmond, California, and we're located on the second floor. And I have our email listed there on the third method if you'd like to send your submissions electronically. Again, this is only for property enrollment and tenancy registration forms. So you might be wondering, what is the importance, or why do you need the enrollment and tenancy registration, or even the payment of the rental housing fee? I haven't covered that section yet, but I will refer back to this slide, so make sure to remember some of these points. The couple of things that are important is compliance is required for rent increases or evictions. So if a landlord is planning to increase the rent or proceed with an eviction, it's important that they ensure that they are enrolled or registered for their tenancies and pay the rental housing fee, because if failure to substantially comply with the applicable sections of the rent ordinance may prevent the landlord from raising the rents, and it also may be an affirmative defense to an eviction lawsuit. So again, I do want to reiterate that enrollment and tenancy registration and payment of the rental housing fee is important, because it then would prohibit the landlord to either raise the rent, meaning applying the annual general adjustment, and failure to be in compliance can be used as an affirmative defense to an eviction lawsuit. So increase compliance. Submitting information about rent and housing services improves compliance with the rent ordinance by making lawful rent levels transparent to both landlords and tenants. Registration is required for each new tenancy or upon turnover of all original occupants. It also supports the rent adjustment petition process. So tenancy registration provides the hearing examiner with data on lawful maximum allowable rent levels for units under consideration and rent adjustments, provides base year rent data for rent-controlled units. Also bolsters our outreach opportunities. In the near future, tenants and landlords will receive an annual notice of maximum allowable rents and a guide to rent control in Richmond, notifying them of vital information about their rights and responsibilities. Lastly, it improves the fee study and billing accuracy. So the enrollment improves the accuracy of the rent program's inventory of rental units and its annual fee study. Landlords are required to enroll rental units and update the status of rental properties. For example, if a unit is now owner occupied, or if a Section 8 tenant moves out and a rent-controlled tenant moves in. So in this slide, I will now go over the residential rental housing fee. The Richmond Rent Ordinance requires the City Council to adopt a residential rental housing fee following a recommendation from the Rent Board. So all landlords subject to the Richmond Rent Ordinance are required to pay the associated rental housing fee. And again, landlords subject to the Rent Ordinance, meaning that they're fully covered or partially covered under the Rent Ordinance. And our fiscal year, as you can see at the very top, is 2023 to 2024. Our fiscal year goes from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2024. If there is a tenancy anytime during the fiscal year, a landlord is to pay the full fee. We do not subsidize the cost of the rental housing fee. The full amount is owed. So for properties that are under both rent control and just cause are to pay $220 per unit. Properties that are partially covered, those are again only under just cause for eviction protections, are to pay $125 per unit. So on this chart, we have the City of Richmond fiscal year 23-24 fees that are applicable to residential rental properties. At the bottom, you can see we have highlighted which fees are associated with our program. Each department finance department, residential rental inspection program, and fire prevention services fee all charge separate fees. If you have questions about which fees are owed or which have been paid, please check with each department separately. Unfortunately, we don't have a system that keeps everything all on one system. So if you were to inquire about your business license tax, but you call the Richmond Rent Program, unfortunately, we would not be able to assist you with making that payment. We can provide general information regarding the department or the business license tax, but if you have questions of whether it was paid or how much, you would want to contact their department separately. Not all residential rental units are subject to paying all these fees, so it's very important to look at the exemptions column that is here on this slide. And so finally, everything that I have discussed thus far is on this checklist. This checklist can be very helpful for landlords or property managers to understand what is needed in order to be in compliance with the rent ordinance. So you see here on the first step is the enrollment and registration of the property enrollment form, submitting the tenancy registration form for each rental unit that is subject to the rent program, paying your residential rental housing fee, also having an active business license. So for more information, you may contact the business license department, but it is important to understand that all landlords in the city of Richmond are required to obtain an active business license when being a landlord or having a rental in the city of Richmond. And lastly, that you have reviewed the city of Richmond fees applicable to the residential rental properties. That is this chart here. So I do recommend you can take a look at the slide here. We also have this information available in our office, also on our website at www.richmondrent.org under our billing webpage. And one thing I did not mention before is under our residential rental housing fee. So typically we send out rental housing fee invoices anytime after the fiscal year, so around July, August, or September. If you did receive a rental housing fee invoice from the rent program, you may pay online, by check, or deliver in our office or at the cashier's office at 450 Civic Center Plaza in Richmond, California. If you have any questions and you're not sure why you received a rental housing fee invoice, you can always give our office a call, and we have staff, our billing and registration staff, that can assist you and ensure that you are paying the correct fee. But that actually concludes our presentation today. We have our contact information here on this slide. Thank you for listening, and please don't hesitate to contact our office either by phone or email, or you may also visit our website for more information about the Richmond Rent Board or Rent Program. Thank you again, and I hope you have a good day.